active also in the same room. It's been way too long since we've had the chance to gather. I'm incredibly grateful to the Dean, Dean Martinez, and to Associate Dean Lucas for gathering us this way. There's an energy that you can't find in any other space other than what we're about to do. I have known Dr. Knight for more years, Knight-Manuel, for more years than I can probably share. But I've known her since we were in grad school. So Dr. Knight is a UCLA graduate. She has spent her entire career at Teachers College, Columbia, in their Department of Curriculum and Teaching. She is the current editor of Teachers College Record. So she has a great amount of prestige as well as influence on the field. And that's part of the excitement of bringing her here today. One of the things that has also helped me gravitate towards Dr. Knight is her work on college access. She's done some work on communities, civicness in these communities, diverse immigrant communities. So the work is incredibly robust, but her attention in working in particular in New York public schools, a lot of professional development with school teachers. She got to be yesterday with our Institute of Public State Initiatives and all of the Gear Up counselors from 12 districts across the state. So I think she brings an incredible sort of rounded and broad expertise to our conversation today. It is an honor to welcome her to UT. As a note, I do want to mention that she is also honored by others, not just us, including at ARA. She was the Research on Women in Education Willenstein Golden Award winner. She's also a Spencer Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow, and the awards are countless. So please join me in welcoming our dear friend and colleague, Michelle Knight-Manuel. Please also note that we've already given her the greatest award ever, a UT mask.
Thank you. First of all, I really want to thank the Dean for inviting me for the Dean's Distinguished Lecture Series. As many of you are well aware, we are all just starting to get back in public spaces such as this, and so it is truly a delight to be here today. I want to also thank Dr. Lucas, who was very patient with me and getting me on board and getting me here as well with all the logistics. That was just, I just want to thank you so much for that. I also want to thank the Department of Curriculum Instruction and Dr. Cynthia Salinas for hosting me and allowing me to see more of the great state of Texas here in Austin. And so, once again, I just want to say how delighted I am. And I also have to thank all of you for coming out. I mean, you never know during COVID right now who is going to come and who is not going to come. And so I just want to say thank you for all being here today. And I want to share that this is very much a work in progress, and so you're going to see kind of the beginnings of analysis of a 3-year project, and I look forward to sharing more with you. And first of all, I'm a very collaborative-oriented researcher, and it is very important for me to acknowledge all of those who are working with me on this project, specifically my co-PI, Dr. Joanne Marciano, who's the co-PI senior researcher who's out of Michigan State University. I have several graduate student researchers, and one recent one who just graduated in October. So she is now a senior a researcher, and I have a visiting scholar from Turkey who's also joined the team this year. So I want to start out by talking a little bit about this Midwest City School District. It's one of the oldest and largest school districts in the area, and it received a 5-year multi-tiered grant-funded opportunity. And this grant-funded opportunity is for building culturally responsive learning environments in schools in this district, for supporting the capacity of teachers to engage in social-emotional learning, as well as the local university is offering mental health counseling for many of the students and families within the district. So really trying to think across disciplines and a more comprehensive approach to supporting students and families within this school district. It has a 90% minority enrollment, and 59.7% of its population is designated as economically disadvantaged. The Midwest City School District graduation rate is 74.9%, whereas statewide it is 90.6%. So you can begin to see where we're seeing some inequities take place. And then as I begin to talk about the year one school context, we're talking about 5 schools that are located in a large urban school district. 2 of them are high schools and 3 of them are primary schools for this past year. In these 5 schools, we're serving primarily 3,625 Black and Latinx students. And as you can see, the graduation rate is below not only the statewide, but the district-wide level for graduation. And as we begin to think about the 5 schools, one of the things that attracted my attention in terms of resources and inequity in resources, and you begin to think about a high school and a middle school that has the same student enrollment and almost the same number of teachers in the school. However, when we begin to think about the breakdown among counselors, school workers, and administrators, even though there are only about 8 students difference, we begin to see 14 administrators for the high school, whereas the middle school only has 3 administrators. You see 4 social workers for the high school, where we see 1 social worker for the middle school, and then 7 counselors versus 3. So we know inequities are built into the system of even the personnel that is present to serve the student and families in these 2 schools. So I want to talk a little bit about the fact that this district received a $5 million federal grant. And because of the work that Joanne Marciano and I have done in the past 2 years, they asked us to participate in the 3 years that they're funded for the culturally responsive school environments and building capacity within a school setting. And so we looked at the extant literature on culturally relevant sustaining education to continue to think about the topics that we were going to include in the sessions. We had 12 all-day CRE PD sessions and 1 coaching session for each school. I have to share with you, we started in February and March of 2020. You know what that means. Messy, messy, messy. You know, as a qualitative researcher, we are involved in the mess all the time, and once you have the COVID come along, it was interesting that they asked us, would we please continue the CREPD sessions? We were really actually quite surprised that they would want to go online. And I don't know about you here at UT Austin, but you know, to go from 1 day of maybe having some percentage of your classes online to like fully 100% online is a huge shift in the way we think about pedagogy. And I was very, very fortunate to have Joanne Marciano as my partner, I have to say, because they do online teaching at Michigan State University for all of their master's programs. So she was very familiar with being online, and we just grew and developed as we went along. And then the other thing we found, because we had to keep it, the district wanted us to keep it all day, was we had to experiment from month to month for a while what really worked for our participants. So the final way that all-day sessions were implemented was from 8:30 to 10 or 10:30, we would be together online. And then from 10:30 to 12 o'clock, we would do an asynchronous session where they would do work that we had already set up for them. And then they would come back at 1 o'clock, and we would discuss the work that they did during that time period to 3 o'clock and engage further in activities around culturally relevant and sustaining education. And they actually really enjoyed, they were the ones who kept every week doing our exit surveys, would tell us what worked for them or what didn't work for them in having online PD. Some of the topics, for those who are familiar with CRE, culturally relevant education and sustaining education, you might recognize them. Certainly shared definitions and understandings, coming from an asset-based approach, really thinking about the stereotypes related to participants around race and ethnicity, certainly the elements of a college-going culture, thinking about the college-going approaches that schools were engaging with, as well as engaging with wide-part presentations. And at the, as part of this CREPD, all participants were expected to create an action plan that they would implement as part of their work. So this is actually actually a research and development project going on at the same time. So the three research questions involved are: how are participants making sense of culturally relevant education? What is the influence of culturally relevant educational practices, professional development workshops on the beliefs, knowledge, and practices? And then how did COVID-19 influence or not the practices that they engaged with? And so today we're going to focus a bit more on question number 3, although of course some aspects of question 1 and 2 will enter in. So we started out with 35 participants, 16 teachers, 1 school counselor, 8 social workers, 9 administrators, and 1 support staff. And so here's where the messiness of doing CREPD for over a year comes into place, is when you have high turnover at schools, when the PD day that you have that's scheduled on the calendar also becomes a PD day for the whole school district, and they are pulled in multiple directions. So in the end, as part of our first year of the study, we're working with 16 study participants, 6 teachers, 1 school counselor, 6 social workers, and 3 administrators. And I have to say, in terms of really thinking about impacting the school culture, this is the first year that we have had school social workers as part of our PDs, which has made an amazing difference. And I'm going to share a lot of the work from the social workers because I think it's important for us to really think about the ways in which everyone in the school is coming together to work together to support a culturally responsive and relevant learning environment. Of the 16 participants, we were happy to see that 12 of them had 100% attendance. So that is coming monthly for a whole year and a summer institute. 1 of our participants was there for 90%, 2 for 80%, and 1 had less than 50%. The study participants by school enroll, we had high schools and the middle schools, and as you can see, the breakdown of the teachers, social workers, and counselors. Their experience spanned 3 years to 20 years, so we definitely had a diverse group of experienced teachers. And then many of our participants were female and of an ethnic racial minority. And then, I had that twice. Thought it must have been very important. As we can think about data collection, so this first set of data collection, as I shared with you, February and March were our only face-to-face sessions. Then we had the 11 synchronous, asynchronous workshops. And then we had the 4 coaching synchronous, asynchronous sessions, which we were able to record. That is one great thing about, we keep thinking, what are some of the, possibilities from COVID? Actually having your transcript from the Zoom is really quite nice. And then the second aspect is the 16 interviews were conducted over Zoom, the 4 focus groups were conducted over Zoom, and then we had written artifacts from each of the CREPD sessions. And one of the things I have to share is while Joanne, Dr. Marciano, and I conducted the professional development workshops, all of the graduate student researchers and the other senior researchers on the project collected the data. Okay. And in terms of data analysis, we did 2 levels. The first level was certainly coming from Horvat's notion of data analysis, where we want to think about just largely across the data. What did we learn from the data? What do we think of the data? Are there any points of curiosity? What questions were raised for us? And then what are some of the decisions that we might make going forward? And then another level that we coded for was then across the data for emerging categories, patterns, and themes, specifically for question number 3 surrounding COVID-19, and looking for examples that kind of contradicted one another within these themes and areas. So once again, I want to share that these are definitely preliminary findings. There's a lot more for us to engage with, and I certainly hope the questions that we'll have at the end will be fruitful in us thinking through what might be some further thoughts and recommendations or questions we have around the learning curve that was taking place. What was happening around student engagement, school culture, and parent-family involvement. So the first tension was the learning curve. And this turned out to be an interesting aspect of the data that, of course, we would never have collected if we would have stayed face-to-face. but what was the learning curve for the teachers moving so quickly from in-person to going online? And one of our participants said, my lack of knowledge of not knowing how to negotiate the computer. I know how to do the basics. So that was very challenging for me. And then we're expected to manage our paperwork, the new computer programs, the children and families. That was really challenging for me and made the job 3 times harder. One of the reasons why I just kind of embraced it and just looked for help everywhere is because I thought about my students. If I was having a hard time, what must they be feeling? This pandemic highlighted the inequities. It just put us out there front and center. I thought about the need. Here we are moving to a world fully computerized, and our students are not prepared for that. Many jobs are going to be gotten that way. So we begin to see like a couple of layers here. So the first layer is she recognizing that she doesn't know much beyond the basics. And then that is making it 3 times harder to really pick up technology. But she's also recognizing what must this be like for her students, that the teachers themselves are just beginning to access the technology in ways that is supposed to be supporting the students. And so we want to think about the fact that she is also acknowledging, so while she's struggling, she's also acknowledging that she knows this is the world her students are going into. And so therefore we have to really think about what are the ways in which technology is being infused more equitably within our school systems in a culturally responsive way. I'm going to go to the next one. Danny said, oh, it was very, very extremely difficult. And if anyone says it was easy, they are lying. They are lying because it was very hard. Because of our job is about the feeling. We're in the feeling business. He's a school counselor. He said it took a minute just for us staff to understand how to use the technology. How about that? So we came and tried to talk to kids. We had to learn how to turn it on and how to get to Google and how to learn it. That took a month and a half right there. You know, then it took some time for us to sit down and say, how can we start now? We have to get on the system. How can we engage these students, right? That took another time period. So we're beginning to talk about multiple months here that the students, the teachers and the counselors are just getting familiar with the technology to be able to engage with the students. Danny continues to say, it was difficult to do because of technology problems. The economic disparity took a while for our kids to even get the computers. So how do we engage it? What we did was a lot of things via the classroom, starting with the classroom Google space. And then Robert, who's also a high school counselor, said, it became very difficult because for me, who never had to use technology, the realm of counseling and therapy, I don't have the different things teachers are using. You know tablet? No. Padlet? No. I don't know how to use those things. That never, so far for me, it was a learning curve for me, right? It was learning how to get on them. So I just want to say that I think what helped our PDs to be a gracious space was, to be very honest, I was also learning the technology. When our school shifted, I didn't know Google Docs. I didn't know these different forms and ways of engaging that kept students like I was teaching culturally responsive and relevant as a course, and someone said we didn't know what we were going to get. We really thought we had to be a person for this to really work. And so I could be very honest with them about my own learning curve that was going on at the university level and their own learning curve that was going on at the K-12 level. And so I think it created this space of like, oh, we're in this together, really trying to serve our students better. It didn't matter if it was K-12 or if it was higher ed, we were in it together. So I think that really helped us during this struggling period of the learning curve. The second aspect was the tension that appeared around student engagement, and those who felt that they had more student engagement with being on technology, and those who were feeling it was creating less student engagement. So it's not this, oh, technology worked for everyone, or that technology didn't work, but we were in this space of really seeing this tension occurring. So one of the administrators said, I would say that the greatest thing that has influenced me is just teaching. The teachers how to improve the types of interactive technology pieces out there so that the students are more engaged. So the administrator was certainly on board with wanting teachers to take up different types of technology. Maria, online it was difficult to engage in general with all the students. But then we were able to do more SEL classes with them. So that was because it was more consistent than when we were in the building. But when we were online, it was very consistent, the schedule. We were able to be consistently having those same sessions. Because when they were in the building, they were being pulled out for different kinds of things. So they were never getting the same kids consistently in the same sessions to work with them. So the online provided a space where once again, you don't have all those interruptions happening. So then they began to have more consistent practices really in working around socio-emotional learning. And Danny was like, I guess one of the lessons that we learned from this was that you are able to use technology for your benefit, which is, you know, reaching out to some students who sometimes are not as verbal in person, for whatever reason, but they feel more secure, maybe because they're at home, and maybe some of them because they feel a little distance between this device that some of these children did not respond with the online. Sounds familiar, right? Like with our own students at the higher ed level. Like in some ways, this disengagement, like did the home make you feel more secure? Or at other times it was like, I can be totally disengaged and it allows me this distance from the professor. Robert was talking about a new set of practices occurred for him. I think more teachers work with students. We are learning they have different learning styles and they're taking part in the learning. So we're asking them what works for them, right? We're giving them different ways because remember, in school you were just like, you turned the work into us as a person. But now we're giving them different ways to turn in work. So you could turn it in Google Classroom, you could turn it in, what's the other one? Oh, Class Dojo, you know? And also, you know, you're working more with the parents, more with the families. So this idea of, we've had learning styles out there forever, but yet in this new online environment, how they were able to see giving students the option to turn in their work differently enabled more engagement. And then once again, this less different student engagement ideas like rubbing up against one another. And we have one of our participants saying, as much as I realize that we live in the information and technology age, I'm still a proponent of just old school, like sitting down, having a conversation, face-to-face with someone. Hey, I'm sure there's some of us who feel this exact same way. And I would have to say how much I absolutely hate WebEx, because that's when the school district uses it. I hate it with a passion. It's just so complicated and difficult. I mean, Zoom is a lot easier, but I get the issues with like security and safety. Anyway, so I think definitely the technology of having to use video conferencing has definitely had an impact on being able to meet with students. Some students don't want to be on camera, they don't want to turn their cameras on, they don't want to log on. A lot of students don't even want to talk on the phone. So it's like this, you know, this confliction going on between like, I'm sure it's coming across, I hate WebEx, you know, this is just so complicated, this is too much. And yet, knowing at the same time that maybe they're getting to meet more often with the students, but then at the same time, students disengaging. So how do we like really think about these layers of what is going on around the technology with different participants that we have? We had, I think Ricardo, a social studies teacher, said, I make sure to make connections with what we're studying and what is happening today. It's amazing to see the students getting excited when those connections are made. I'm also sharing the responsibility of instruction with them. I'm changing the assignments where groups of students are facilitating conversations and teaching me and their peers on aspects of the lesson. I'm really conscientious of making everything culturally relevant because I see the difference in the kids to the lessons. So this is a teacher who's actually beginning to see the possibilities of technology and CRE coming together and really allowing his students to have more voice in the curriculum. So in terms of after COVID, what are we thinking is going to happen? And Vanessa, who was one of the ones struggling at the beginning, said not enough computers to support this online process after COVID. We're forced to go in a direction that could have positive impacts on students and society at large. If we plan for our students to be culturally relevant, we need to maintain at least one complete day of online learning for students and staff. We also need more trade and technical training to create educational opportunity for access and equality for future generations. So we want to think about that fact. What do we think would happen if students, teachers, community members, if school was for 4 days out of the week in person and 1 day online? What difference might that make? You know, how might that engage students differently and families differently? Are we thinking about that possibility at all after COVID? So this third area of thinking about technology and what was beginning to happen around connections with colleagues. And one of the activities we had them do was mapping their ideal school at the Furious 5. And one of the things that came out that was so interesting to me is we talk a lot about the mental health and well-being of our students, but almost all of the schools have some space of a therapy room for even the teachers. A space of, I love this, a spa. Wouldn't we love that? In our ideal school. Some school probably does have a spa somewhere. This notion of like how we could have a food court. Obviously something around food is going on that they want to have a food court. And so one of the things we realized, they wanted yoga, that there was really a sense that teachers were exhausted, teachers were so drained, and teachers really wanted a space, if we're going to have an ideal school, to really think about how we support the well-being of our teachers. And I think we focus on the academics and pedagogically teaching about, how to teach your subject matter, but where does the well-being of the teachers come into the ways we think about teacher education? So positively influencing the school culture from the perspective of Eleanor, who says that school culture is more open, inviting, and unified during COVID, and relationships with students more intentional and focused. So as we think about what could be the positive influence of online learning, Ricardo says, yes, we have PLCs and we share through these settings. In one of the PLCs, YouTube video was shared where the student yelled out to the teacher, what does what you are teaching mean to me? So we were asked to share different strategies we were learning in a PD that we were using in our teaching. So for example, one of my students said she was tired of hearing about Rosa Parks during Black History Month. So I gave her Angela Davis. And she came back lit. She was on fire with Angela Davis's story. Her work was all new to the students. She knew nothing about Angela Davis. One of the things I'm going to change in my African American Studies unit is adding more women who were involved beyond the usual names we see during Black History Month. So even this notion that the teachers who were part of the CREPD were going back and sharing some of these things that were having an impact on positively influencing other teachers within the school. And I love it, back to the WebEx. We did have virtual events. We did continue to keep those. We didn't stop any of those kind of events like Black History Month with projects and events for Hispanic heritage. We kept that, even though it was virtual. We did different projects. An event was 400 and something people. And on Zoom, so they were all shared with each individual classes, and the classes, they, discussed it and talked about it. So even though it wasn't the whole school, it was school-wide, but it was, WebEx school-wide. So this notion of really positively impacting the school culture is what is the ways that the use of technology can make that happen. So let's see. So then it was very interesting that these increased collaborations that began to take place. And one of our participants said, I'll connect with everybody, but the ones that I'm very close to were on the phone, you know, constantly calling, constantly texting. We have group chats for sending information, group emails for sending information. We do case conferencing on WebEx all the time. Well, you know, we support each other that way. I love and adore, absolutely adore Carol. She popped up and surprised me in front of my house just to jump off some little care goodies that, you know, I don't even have an ability to get out, so she's got some things to my home. We will work to stay in touch. We're always in communicating with texting, phone calls, video conferencing, pop-up surprise visits. So this notion of increased collaboration through technology was certainly happening now that was not taking place before COVID. So I'm going to start in the middle with the orange. The principal administration has created, it seems like, more opportunities for staff to get together. So we have Wisdom Wednesday. I love that, Wisdom Wednesday. I don't know what happens the other days, but these on Wednesday, Wisdom Wednesday. And we have staff meetings every Monday morning where we meet prior to the class starting. But I was never part of it because I was always working with the students that were coming in the door. And maybe because I wasn't able to attend before, but it seems like I'm able to interact with the staff a little bit more. So this notion of really this disruption or other, you know, responsibilities that people have when you're in the building actually appear to be creating barriers for this collaboration in a school culture. And so how do we begin to think about the ways in which, you know, moving to this online has supported them and influencing their school culture? So the last one I want to talk about is how technology impacted the parent and family involvement. And so this was one of the flyers that was in early January 2020 at one of our schools around immigration in the workshop information session. You can see it's in English and in Spanish. And then we had one around healthy nutrition and really supporting families on a budget to really think about what healthy nutrition would be. And so one of the reasons why I chose the healthy nutrition is because food comes up a couple of different times within the school context during COVID. So Jenny says, this was my most fun experience, I guess. This came from one of our discussion forums. We were literally learning from each other, and we were coming up with ways that I could implement their culture into what I was eating. They were doing the research for me. Miss Hope, this doesn't have any sugar. It was a fruit. And then the parents got involved, and they were all online. Miss Hope, I'm going to make you, and I was like, okay, let's do it. But it lightened up the mood. What we realized was that we all had in common was this something that was important to our families was our food. The foods that we eat, the cultural foods, where we shop, the foods available in our communities, because they were like, Whole Foods? I've never been to Whole Foods, but I've been to the bodega. Do you know what they have? So this notion that health, nutrition, taking care of one another, you know, they wanted to take care of Miss Hope because the part I didn't read it, but she was really trying to lose some weight, and she was saying, like, what can I eat? What can I eat? But the parents got involved. They were even trying to make her food, you know, to help her. So this notion that this was coming about through online group discussions that you could have with families. And then an aspect that we also had to think about was what COVID did in terms of economics. And this person said, we often, how did we get them food? Are our babies even eating? That is the difference between the areas that are being served by kids. Even the food banks were not in our area, but somewhere else. It wasn't right here or at the church around the corner. It showed that we had to hit the basic needs first. Do you have lights? Parents don't have money. That part of CRE with the emotional part, do students feel safe? That has to be done from inside the home. You haven't heard from a child in weeks. Are they safe? Do we know where they are? Are they eating? So these things are prioritized first. And then it was so interesting. Thomas is a teacher. He says, I call parents every day. Like, you know, like I have never in the 16 years I've been teaching called parents as much as I do now. You know, I try to talk to them. And he's coming from this very positive stance of not being engaged. He's at the high school level, not being engaged with parents. And now he's like, I'm doing more than I've ever done in 16 years. And then this notion of, I try to be much more accommodating when I'm dealing with parents. Like I have a family session that I had to bring all the family members together in order for them to rally around the daughter to get her to graduation. So because of our work schedules, or your work schedules, I find myself calling them at 7 o'clock at night. And you know, I see myself doing things like working outside of my normal schedule and just checking on them at odd hours. I think they see you as human when you do that. You know, it's like to do it outside of the 8 to 3 time zone. I think that helps to make a statement. So we have to begin to think about our schedules that we have for working with parents and families and communities. We have to think about, does that 8 to 3 schedule work? Who's it working for? Who does it benefit? Who is it not benefiting? In terms of our increased parent-family involvement that we seek to have all the time. And then Maria talked about, you know, I've been in more communication with parents, which is a good thing because you know you get to meet and you know parents a little better. And it also allows you to understand your students a little better. As far as community-wise online, I was able to refer a lot of different resources to families that needed, you know, different resources during COVID. So this connection with parents is actually enabling more resources to get to the community that might not otherwise have happened. So as I think about these 4 areas of the learning curve, student engagement, school culture, parent and family involvement, I try to think about, so what do we want to continue after COVID? And why? What do we want to let go? And why? And so when we think about the learning curve, I think about those of us who are in teacher education, you know, what are the ways we engage, you know, digitally now in our classes, in our pre-service classes? Are they, I don't know about many of the professors here, but I know a few years ago, I started when they were asking recommendations from my graduate students, they asked me, have they taught any online classes? Can they teach any online classes? And this was like 3 years ago, where I was starting to get that question. And so this notion of where is it coming into the ways in which we engage with our pre-service teachers as well as our in-service teachers. And the learning curve that needed to take place, and in this instance they understood that they were creating more of an equity because they didn't have that skill set. And then we want to think about student engagement, you know, at the high school level as well as higher ed. You know, in what ways has online learning created more student engagement? Or has it created less student engagement? Under what conditions do we need to think about to create more student engagement at the K through 12 level through online learning as well as at the higher ed level? And certainly positively influencing the school culture is certainly a byproduct of this work that I think even the participants didn't imagine would happen. Their increased collaboration with one another, their increased connections with one another, because they were using technology to now talk to others through other devices. And I would say this was the least contentious area, was the parent-family involvement. Was they felt there might have been, in some cases, less student engagement, but for the vast majority of them, there was increased parent-family involvement because of being online. Being able to get them resources, being able to engage them in ways with their students that they hadn't been able to do so before. And so, as I think about closing this aspect of the presentation, I just want to invite you to think and share with me some of the thoughts or questions that emerged for you, listening to some of the voices of the participants, thinking about how we're working across disciplines with school, social workers, with counselors, with teachers, with administrators, to really think about building that environment that supports, you know, the emotional, the academic, the civic learning of our students. And so I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, your thoughts, ways of engaging further with this work. So thank you.
So I was really interested interested when you brought up that point about what if we went online for one day of the school week
Yes.
and then in person for?
Yes.
Like, what would you think of that? What would be your opinion on that?
Because honestly, I see some of the benefits of what the participants are saying. I think some combination might actually be interesting if we're really going to reimagine education. Like, let's break out of the box of all of us being at school 5 days a week, you know, the same time period. Obviously, there is some benefit going on here. So, where could we begin the experiment is what I would say. Yeah. Yes?
We touched on this morning, but as I'm looking at the data, I think what's on my mind is how little we know about what makes programmatic efforts, interventions that support culturally responsive approaches work. And I think the developers sometimes we get caught up in like it's all about the content. We got to make sure we manage the content. And what's hard to know in this disruptive moment is what drives positive effects from these kinds of programmatic efforts, and what could we be sacrificing if we don't understand the core components really well. So is it really the content, and all we have to do is share the content to be more adaptable to the use of technology? If you hedge your bet that it's content, that works really well. But if you believe that, you know, we talked about the importance of social support, particularly among parents with each other in some of these programmatic efforts, if you believe that matters, we might think differently about how technology could enhance that or interfere with it. So what I'm struck with is what an important moment this is, but also how little we know about what actually within our programmatic approaches, what makes things better. Is it the content? Is it the process or structure of our approach? Is it the theory? Is it the things is it the values? Is that, like, the content doesn't matter as long as we're consistent with the core values. How we deliver it doesn't matter. And I feel like these disruptive moments is a call for us to better understand what drives positive outcomes when we take these disruptive approaches to supporting students.
Yeah.
So I realize that was probably a question embedded in there. It felt more like a statement, but maybe you could reflect on that. What are the dangers?
Right. I actually think that's, you know, important for us to concede this is a very disruptive moment, and we have a great opportunity to reimagine what we're doing. But it is understanding what is taking place right now. I think it's going to be interesting to have a new group. We're starting with a new group. To have a new group who are going to go through the same process, and they still want it online. So if it is online, how do we begin to see across cohorts what is really actually taking place? Is it, like you say, is it CRE? Is it the actual content? Is it the technology? Is it other things that they begin to do at the school site because of what happened in the past 2 years with the pandemic? So I do think the fact that we're going to be going across at least 3 years to see that data and begin to like make some, at least to better understand what is going on. Yeah. Yes?
Certainly a fascinating area of conversation. I mean, within the online learning space, within the learning technologies area, for instance, this is so new.
Yes.
There are models. So I teach a course in humanizing pedagogy and online teaching models. When we talk about things like emergency remote teaching,
yes,
ERTE frameworks, that they're so new, they're not very well codified, and they do not incorporate culturally responsive or sustaining approaches, right? So CRE is really not embedded. And so what I'm curious about is, is there a manuscript? I would love to introduce this topic next semester in my class, and I'm just curious if there's a manuscript that I can reference or other, maybe a TED talk or something like that. If that would be lovely.
I have to share with you, like, I am so grateful to have been invited to share this presentation because it has made me analyze more and more of the data. And so we are hoping to change this into an article certainly by the spring. And so, you know, I could definitely share with you more, like some of the readings that we use. However, we are definitely wanting to like publish this work and so begin to get it out there. So thank you for that question. And I actually would like to talk to you more about what is happening in the online space without the CRE, you know, so I hope we can have a short conversation afterwards.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you for being here and making this, we all know it's real, but just doing it anew, and anyway, it impacts at least impacted me more clearly. I was wondering, because I teach about inequality, and I'm wondering, how did you cover issues of inequality? And how is that different from culturally relevant stuff? You know, like, in my mind I have it, but I'm like, how would you decipher the differences? And knowing that this, you know, large percentage of students are economically disadvantaged, I don't know if you have rural versus urban. Like, how do you teach about inequality when this is happening, when inequality is happening in the home, and, you know, out so boldly at this moment?
So I'll say a couple of things. So CRE comes from an asset-based perspective. And in coming from an asset-based perspective, you know, also thinking about Tara Yasso's work on community cultural wealth, is really understanding that there are a lot of strengths and riches within a community, even if there is inequality taking place. And so I think sometimes when we focus on the inequality, the economic inequality, people don't see there's also a rich cultural foundation that students and families are still engaging in, and how do we allow that to come forth in our practice. So that's one thing. The second thing, the reason why inequality for me and CRE go together is that third tenet that Gloria Ladson-Billings talks about around critical consciousness is really the where we want to see, like, what are those larger forces of society that are creating these inequities that our students and families and communities are, you know, experiencing. And so if we leave out, and this is what Gloria Ladson-Billings will say, people are not doing CRE. If you are not doing inequalities, focusing on inequities, focusing on systemic issues that need to be addressed. So we didn't shy away in our CREPDs. If things were happening in the news, like, you know, the killing of George Floyd, you know, anti-Asian hate, like, we did not shy away from that. We would put it up, some quote up, and we would engage that maybe as an opener in the session so that people knew, and they would talk to us about the inequities that many of their students were experiencing and how they were trying to address them. So for me, if you are not dealing with and addressing and challenging the inequities in society that our students and families and communities are facing, you're not doing culturally relevant education.
Thank you.
And then, yes.
So I also do a lot of professional development in schools, and I think here in Austin, for a lot of teachers, this is a really heavy time. This is a really difficult time. And so I'm really curious about that high school teacher who seemed very energized about making phone calls, the quote that you had from that teacher.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the factors that maybe you saw that contributed to a teacher not just checking off boxes and feeling like I have to do this or I should do this, but a teacher moving into work because of, you know, an ethic of care or moving towards a more socially just world. I just wondered if you could talk about that, because I was really struck by that piece of data that you shared. Like, what happened there?
So I would say the student engagement piece was the piece that many of them came with in terms of they were afraid they were going to lose that student engagement. They felt that that really was one of their greatest strengths, that they knew how to engage students, they knew how to mentor students. You know, they knew how to have, you know, sessions with certain groups of students to encourage and motivate them. And so once we moved online, they expressed their concern that they were going to lose that kind of touch with the students. And so I think that was part of the drive, was they came in having that commitment to their students and that aspect of strong student-adult relationships within their schools. And so I think that really helped to motivate them. And I think that even as the social worker was sharing, like, just, you know, she knew that her students needed this. So that motivated her to learn because she knew they needed her to learn. And so I think the fact they were committed to the students, and you know, I meant to say this at the beginning and I want to say it now because you brought it up and I want to thank you for bringing it up. I really honored the work that our participants were doing. It was hard. Every time we met, we knew they were struggling, and yet they came to the, like I said, 12 of them, 100%, they came because they were still trying to make a difference. And you know, that kept me encouraged because I said, oh my goodness, they're working this hard. I need to be working as hard. And so, You know, I just want to say how much I appreciate the teachers, the counselors, the social workers, the administrators, the parent coordinators, all of them who kept going during this period. So thank you for bringing up that question. Oh, yes.
I'm really struck by this application of CRE to school staff, right? For example, social workers. And
Yes.
I think there's so much that we can learn from teacher education because we mostly think of CRE in terms of practice in the classroom.
Yes.
Working
Yes.
instruction.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you have already started looking at some of that data. How would you describe how the social workers sort of responded to or took up this, this concept of CRE, and how did they see it applying to their own practice, the work that we do as students?
So I have to share with you, it was a wonderful surprise that they felt that they were already engaged in doing the work, that they had been exposed to cultural competence in their counseling, the courses that they had taken. They knew they could engage with families without being culturally competent. And so sometimes, and I'm gonna have to write about this in the data, there's like a tension that the social workers felt that the teachers needed to get on board because they were already on board. So it was fascinating to me because I had never had this combination, of participants together to see how they were experiencing CRE, and they wanted to enact it more, as you can see. But it was definitely this tension that they felt that they had been exposed, they were trying to engage in it, and they were appreciative of like being pushed and challenged more to think about what that might mean. But certainly there was a tension that they just felt like, teachers, come on board, so that was interesting. Yeah. Thank you. That might be our last, one more question.
One question. How do you go from a culturally relevant approach to a culturally sustaining approach? Now that you know that this is happening, how do you keep it going?
So I think for me, I am still in the process. I teach this course and I tell my students, I'm still in the process of really understanding where the differences are. Where does it really overlap, and where are there multiple differences? So I think around the data that we have around language, because in some of the schools there were so many languages that were being spoken, and there was a group of participants who really wanted to take up, being a multilingual school and what does that mean. So I think that's an area that culturally sustaining talks a lot about, around this linguistic dexterity and flexibility that we can have and that we can support with our students and families. So that's one area where I think it's going to come out even more as we engage with that aspect of the data. And certainly looking forward to where other places might be more distinctive as well. Thank you.